Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Unexplain It to Me podcast, where we talk about our unexplaining of religious dogma in our lives. Today we're going to be blessing you with our deconversion stories, or I think that it's called the deconstruction of the faith when you start to step back and look at everything.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yep.
uh, so let's just start with some questions, so that way people can understand where we're coming from and have something to reference to as we get more episodes, and people are like, why are they saying that?
And why do they believe this and that? And yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hit me
All
up.
right. So Dan, what was your view of religion when you were like K through 12?
Went to Catholic preschool, technically pre-K, But
Hmm.
that then we moved, um, and technically didn't really do anything until maybe fifth grade. Got late, into Catholicism again. Normally your first communion is at second grade, and I did mine in fifth or sixth. I think it was sixth grade now that I think back. So yeah, I look like a buff little second grader up there in front of everyone. So yeah, did that. High school, get confirmed in 10th grade slash junior year. Did that, so technically I was confirmed, and I guess technically probably still am in the Catholic Church.
Hmm.
So yeah, so that was pretty much it. And then I'm pretty sure the day after I got confirmed, I never went back to the Catholic Church. Yeah, it's a pretty safe bet off the top of my head. Yep, yep.
Nice.
How about you?
So, for me, I grew up in a pretty religious house. I went to a Lutheran preschool and kindergarten and part of first grade, which was also our Lutheran church. And I don't know any of the differences between the God, why can I never remember this word?
Sects?
Yeah, but when you
Uh,
say that, it sounds like sex.
yeah, I know. What about the
The
different
different
denominations?
Yeah, I didn't really know the difference between like the different denominations, but we were Lutheran up until then, and then we moved to a small town where I went to a public school, and then we switched to evangelical, which was honestly a fun transition because you didn't have to dress up. They served pizza. There was a rock band on Sundays, so it
Hmm.
was a cool experience. And then throughout middle and high school, I just got enveloped in the church and served a lot. I was heavily involved in the youth group and serving on Sundays and Saturdays. I spent a lot of time at church every week, like between Wednesday nights for youth group and Thursday for the band practice, and then Saturday and Sunday for the actual church service. And both my parents served, so if I wasn't serving, I was still there for most of the day. So yeah, very, very heavily involved in the church.
I think if they caught me more than two times a week, um, they probably would have called CPS because something's wrong.
Something's wrong. They're bringing this kid in. They're
Yeah,
they're they're looking for
someone else
forgiveness for
must be.
something.
Yeah, someone else is bringing me in, and my parents aren't involved because I mean, I didn't want to go. So
Right.
yeah.
All right. Well, what was your view of religion in college?
So yeah. So in college is when I started going to a Assemblies of God, and then in the future a non-denominational. But by that time, you're older, and you're not in the youth group. So excuse me, my friends had been helping slash running the youth group, so I decided to do that. So Wednesdays we'd get there and set up stuff, play games with the kids, just like be there for them, maybe I guess.
Hmm.
And I mean, I'm not like super old at that point, so they're probably a year or two
Only,
younger than me,
yeah,
so I knew them. It's not awkward or anything.
yeah.
So yeah, pretty much did that, and then go to church again. I guess maybe once, twice a month,
Hmm.
maybe more if I'm guilted into it or whatnot. But right around there, I would say is probably
Were
the
you
sweet spot.
were
So
you peaked in your Christianity?
yeah, probably at about 23 was probably by the time I was going the most, maybe 24. But
Gotcha,
yeah, so quite a few years ago. But yep.
gotcha.
How about your college
So
experience?
yeah, I went to a university, and I was not impressed with the crew, the Campus Crusades for Christ. So um, mostly a lot of my religion. I didn't go to church at that time, but I did lead like a guy's Bible study, which was a weird experience. I got roped into that through one of the guys from crew, and then I didn't talk to anyone, and they yeah, it was weird. So I mostly learned about religion, like what other people believed, because obviously university, you're finally meeting different people.
Hmm. Yep.
So I met more atheists, like different parts of Christianity, again, different denominations. So like other Catholics and Lutherans and Baptists and things like that. And I started to realize that like when you grow up in the church, you're kind of taught like God is this one thing, and that's
Hmm.
how that
Yep.
church teaches it. So that's who God is, and like set in stone. And then you start to realize there's people who believe slightly different things. You're like, well, that's kind of that's different. Like I didn't realize God could be that. But then as you ration with it in your own mind and you're not exposed to your own church, you start to compensate in different areas and you think like, oh, I used to think this about God, but now I think this because that makes more sense with what I've been presented. So
Hmm. Yep.
my I still like was full into the faith, like believed 100%, but like my view of God was definitely shifting
Hmm.
throughout
Yep.
college.
Which
So
makes sense.
yeah, yeah, and I think that happens for a lot of people. Just being exposed to the real world for the first time in their life outside of their small town.
Yeah, it's a different, very different change of pace and people you're around. So that
Yeah,
makes a lot of sense.
yeah. So, what happened that started to make you doubt?
A handful of years ago, I remember going to get some food with a coworker, and we had somehow gotten on the talks of politics. And my brilliant self at the time, that I look back and kind of semi cringe, pulled out the classic. I'm fiscally conservative because we should be spending money on people, blah blah blah, poor people or helping
Hmm.
people. And
Yeah,
yeah, I was probably a little not a great person at that point in my life. And yeah, so then they went on to tell me about like their hardships, how much social programs had helped them, and where they would be if they didn't have them, and how tough their life would be. And
yeah.
none of this was self-inflicted, by the way. So it's even harder,
To
and
like
it made me think harder.
rationalize.
Yeah, when
Yeah,
somebody gets dealt this hand and they can't really do anything about it. It happens, and some
yeah,
people need help. So
and it's yeah, especially when they genuinely benefit from
yeah,
that financial
them and their
help.
family. Yeah,
And you're this whole time you're like, well, the people who are using that are cheaters and
yeah.
thieves
You
and
hear all these conservative pundits being like, we need a drug for test for welfare and blah
yeah.
blah blah, and far deeper and probably for another time. But all that stuff, I guess, whilst I was still lightly believing,
Hmm.
kind of got in my head, and I mean, I would say I was probably brainwashed to a degree,
Yeah.
um, and then guilted quite a bit. So I didn't really think for myself at that point. So I had a very different worldview than what the actual world was like.
Yeah.
So so yeah, that was probably the tipping point. And then over the course of, man, 5 to 7 years, I would probably say, person that could tell little things that started to change, like
Hmm.
between the people I met, the experiences I've seen, again, people that I came into contact, like I had said about this person, and things like that had really slowly started to shape. And then I started getting a lot more interested in like watching science and
Hmm.
other miscellaneous stuff like that, that sort of made me feel like I didn't know what I was really advocating for.
Yeah.
Uh, and from there, it just kind of took off over time till
Hmm.
where I am now.
Yeah. Nice. So, like, kind of similar for me. What it really was is learning about science because in high school I was definitely the person who didn't like really pay attention during science class because I was under the impression that is everything was explained by God and things we could explain through science was only because God allowed us to be able to explain it through science. So
Yeah, which is really funny to look at now.
yeah,
I'll interject because of where you are now. I
I
mean, I
know.
never would honestly guess, but yeah,
So yeah, it was finally starting to learn science about things because I should say like when you have that mindset, like you understand that the science might be real, but you kind of like stop yourself from fully understanding it just because in case it does conflict, like with evolution
yeah.
and
There's
Big
a
Bang, like
point you're willing to go with, and then there's a hard stop too.
yeah, yeah. So to finally like learn the science, and I know I'll talk more about like the God of the Gaps in more episodes, but that was the big thing for me. It was like I had God explain pretty much everything in my worldview. And then as I learned more and more, like God didn't need to explain as much. So my God became smaller per se. And I'll use
Yep.
so like just making God so small in my need for explanations for the world I lived in and my view of reality now. I started to like look out like, okay, maybe I should invest the source, the Bible. And I didn't read it cover to cover, but just getting the first couple books in, you realize that is not the good book.
Yep.
Um, so finally, like seeing that, and then being like, okay, well, the science doesn't really point towards that, and what I have for evidence for it isn't absolutely great. It kind of left me with a well, I don't need to believe in God, and if there is a God, it's probably not the guy in this book. So,
Mm-hmm.
and I should mention too that was between when I started to actually take interest in science was like the end of college. Unfortunately, I always take interest in things after I'm learning about
Yep.
in a place where I'd actually learn about it.
Yep.
So from there until probably 6 or 7, no, probably not that long, 5 or 6 years. Just a slow descent of as I learned more, God became smaller. As I learned more about the Bible, God became worse.
A
That's,
warped kind of sense
yeah,
of what
like
you thought.
he
Yeah.
he wasn't the nice, all loving God that I thought he was, and
Mm-hmm.
he's definitely the Bible's definitely full of contradictions too. So over that course of time, it definitely got me down to the point where I was like, I don't think I need this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can relate.
So what do you believe now?
Uh, I guess my beliefs would probably align with that of atheism.
Hmm.
I mean, it's probably a little deeper than that, but
Yeah, it's not black and white, but
yeah, that's the biggest thing that I've come to realize. Yeah, so I would say I'm like an atheist. It's not as black and white as I
yeah.
as I think most people would assume it is.
Hmm.
I mean, there's also varying levels of atheism, anti-theism, agnosticism.
Yeah.
It's just very deep.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people paint like a straw man atheist when you are a Christian, saying like, oh, they just don't want to believe or they just want to sin. When it really
Yeah,
it's a
I
lot more
mean,
complicated than that.
yeah, and I think for me, I've tried to put morals first. Like,
Hmm.
I can be a good person without belief, like, or faith. Like that doesn't make me who I am. Yeah, morals, I guess. Atheistic morals. Be a good
Gotcha.
person, and I guess believing in God or lack of belief in God doesn't mean I'm going to become a murderer or become a terrible person.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, how about you?
So yeah, I would put myself in the atheist category too. And it's definitely just because I was so indoctrinated to like unexplain everything. I have sought out like a lot of resources and learned a lot of stuff. Like you were saying,
Mm-hmm.
who I am now compared to 7 years ago, completely different person. But yeah, like atheism is the belief claim of I'm not convinced by the evidence that there is a God. Like maybe there is, but I'm not convinced by it. But I would be one of those people who would positively say like the God of the Bible is demonstrably false.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe there is a God. I can't disprove it, but at the same time, I'm at the point where it's the what I did believe is definitely off the table as a realistic option.
Yeah, yep, I totally feel you there.
Yeah. So I'm gonna add a question because we've redone this podcast so many times now. I'm gonna spice it
Technical
up.
issues.
so So what made I know I came to you with the idea of doing a podcast about this stuff because we talked about it quite
It's
a bit, but not
Yeah, it's
not
came
like
up.
extensively. So I was
Not
like,
not
hey,
specifics. Yeah. Yep.
yeah, and I had a lot of like talks written up that I wanted to record, but recording yourself talking and picture slideshows is kind of boring. I was like, would you want to do a podcast? What made you want to say yes?
Uh, I think getting a lot off my chest, especially this last year with this annoying little corgi. Oh, ow,
Come on, man.
dude! You went right into my finger. Drop. Oh my god, dude. That was like a full canine into my middle finger. Yeah, so when you asked me, I think it like we've kind of talked in maybe one of the other recordings that's coming back to me. But therapeutic, I guess, was probably a word that I
Hmm.
would say kind of came up. And this last year with COVID has really made me think a lot deeper about maybe people I had been involved with or things I used to hold true
Yeah.
or just morals in general. Like, and I won't go too deep into it because it's far deeper than that. But just the last year in general has made me, I guess, forcibly tell myself that I am atheist. Like it's really, this was the final 365 days that has really pushed me to that level, I guess. So
Yeah.
that's why I was on board. Is like, I know you have stuff to get out, and mine's
Hmm.
probably not as much or as deep because personally, I don't think I was as deep into it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that was this last year has really been a lot and something that I kind of feel like now I finally can get off my chest. Where with where I'm at in life, I feel more comfortable and
Hmm.
correct about my feelings, and not just like
Yeah.
maybe I don't believe in this, but no, I feel pretty solid in my beliefs now and secure. So
Yeah.
plus, I have all this free time, and I figured I've always wanted to do a podcast, so it kind of lined up with two things.
It
So
just worked out.
yeah, yeah.
So
How
yeah.
about what was your reason for thinking of it? I guess in general.
Yeah. So like I said, I had several talks because I'll I want to destigmatize depression and anxiety, and
Oh yes.
I'll be straight up. I mean, I'll say I have it. I'm guessing you'd
Oh
admit you
yeah.
have it too.
Got them
Yeah.
good meds.
So like, yeah, I think actually being able to, because I mean, technically it is a form of trauma. Like
Mm-hmm.
it completely
Religious trauma.
flips.
Yeah.
Yeah, it completely flips your worldview. Everything that I thought was true is now like on shaky ground, and everything that I swore I would never like believe or be that person, now I am that person, and I'm realizing it's not who I thought it was. So I think, yeah, like you said, it's therapeutic to like actually talk about it. And granted, I have a therapist too, so it's not like this is my only form, but
Yeah. But it's still a
no,
good outlet.
yeah, like, and I think the biggest thing for me was I know what it's like to be at like that crossroads where you're like starting to actually question and you're sincerely unconvinced by the evidence for God, or you're finding evidence that is conflicting with it. Like I know exactly what that feels like. And for me, the biggest thing to make me feel better about deconverting was listening to other people's stories and realizing there were so many people who have gone through
Mm-hmm.
this. Like in their I hate using the word testimony, but in their deconversion or deconstruction story, they're like some of their details about who they were as a religious person were like exactly me. So to hear someone who was exactly where I was ending up where I am now in roughly the same spot is like, okay, well, this is like reassuring that,
Yeah, and some validation that you're
yeah,
not the only one, and you're never too deep to come out of it, and
exactly. Yeah.
reassurance. Yep.
And there's nothing wrong with questioning, and there's nothing wrong with being unconvinced by things that you used to be convinced by as you learn new things. So I think it's
Yeah.
good to
Exactly.
have resources to turn to, even though, because I'll admit, like I've definitely exhausted pretty much every atheist YouTuber. So, like like everything becomes redundant after a while, but it's nice to know so many people hold the same beliefs as me now, who
Mm-hmm.
used to hold, like it's nice to know that you're not alone. And I
Yeah.
think that that was my biggest reason is you're not alone in this.
But again, much
Yeah,
deeper
but
conversation
before
for
we
another
get
time.
too derailed, yeah,
Yes.
but let's wrap it up here. And then let's give a little preview next week. I know I've already told you this because we re-recorded this episode so many
Yep.
freaking times.
But hey, third time's a charm.
Next week we're going to talk about angry atheists. So
Yep.
stay tuned, and if you like this one, stick around for the next one.